What is up, my Pro Design Builder family? I'm Sam, also known as the Pro Design Builder. I'm the best in the business, and it's not even close, right? So, a few weeks ago, I put in the chat if there's any particular training you guys wanted me to do something on. And, one of the guys that raised their hands was Andrew Mason. He said he wanted to know how to push projects through to the city, right? So I documented that. I always want to add value. He's pretty active. The group is small right now, which is okay. And I'd like to have more activity. So I want to encourage you guys, if you guys are looking for additional topics or trainings that you want to know about, reach out to me. I have no problem with circling around and making sure that I provide that for you. So let's start at the top. This group is specifically for real estate investors who are looking to make the transition into new development. I would know this story well because my story, I had to trip and fall and make a lot of mistakes. But the good thing about making mistakes is there's a lot of lessons learned. So there's a lot of things that I wouldn't do. I wouldn't do now compared to then. Also, I wasted 8 years trying to make all of the right decisions, trying to make my own transition into figuring out how to do this. And you don't have that sort of time, right? So that's the one thing that I know is time is not guaranteed to anybody, right? And don't ever pretend like time is on your side, right? Because it's not, right? You could blink wrong and your life could be gone, right? So that's just from me, from personal knowledge, having some scary life experiences and knowing that you don't have the time that you think that you have, right? So if you don't know my story, I started out as a wholesaler. I was very green as a wholesaler. As a matter of fact, my wife was going to med school, and at the time, I ran a body shop, right? And when she was going to med school, she was going to go to med school in the islands. And right before she was supposed to go, she wrote me a letter. She said, "Sam, I don't want to go. I don't foresee our family unit like we envisioned and all of that stuff. I have to travel and be so far away, and then I'm going to go to Chicago, and I just don't see it happening, right?" So naturally for me, I am a ambitious guy. I am a power couple type of guy is what I was thinking in the beginning. And so I was kind of like, well, if you're going to be here, then what you're going to do, right? So she was like, let's look into real estate. So she handed me the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I read through it. It really caught me, really grabbed my attention. And I was really drawn to the idea of getting involved in real estate. So from there, we went to one seminar together. She already had this stuff already paid for. And then it really it struck a chord with me. I was kind of like, well, this might be it. And so it took me one more seminar to go to, and then I started taking massive action. Right? That's the difference between learning something and achieving a goal is going to be massive action. And that's no different from anything that you decide to do, right? So that's one of the things that I preach as a coach is making sure that you're taking massive, sometimes messy action where you don't know all the steps, but that's what I'm here for, to help you move you along. And from there, things will start to drop in your lap, right? So for me, when I started wholesaling, I was green. I didn't know what to do. I didn't even know how to fill out a contract. Most real estate contracts are very big. They're like at the time, I think they might have been 12 or 17 pages long. So I'm calling my buddy Mike because he works at the title company and he's going to be handling the title work for my specific deal. And Mike was just telling me, hey, don't put zero on the escrow line. Here, you need to fill it out this way. Make sure you initial it there, And I just literally would like listen to him and just go do what Mike said because I know Mike was going to handle the paperwork and make sure that I'm good as the investor. Plus, he gets paid when we close. So that's kind of how my journey started, but it didn't stop there. So from there, I did some more deals, and then I got into flipping, and then on my first flip, I remember it like it was yesterday because it stung a little bit. On my first flip, I hired a contractor, I fired a contractor. I hired a contractor, I fired a contractor. I hired a third contractor, and on my third contractor, I finally got far enough in the job that I was able to finish. Luckily, it was a meaty deal for us, and we still made money. But what that taught me and told me that it was, I was never going to be happy with that level of management until obviously one, I find a great contractor. But they were so hard to find a great contractor that does a whole bunch of things well, which is communicates well, organized, does what he says he's going to do, and honors honors his word, right? So that's very hard to find. Has great anticipation, knows logistics, and has all of the pieces. There's so many things that go into being a great contractor that I didn't know then. So I started running my own projects, and I started getting in and out of flips very quickly. I could get in and out of a flip in 45 days, 50 days, whole house renovation, several bathrooms, kitchen, everything planned, everything ordered, everything situated for my investor partner. And all they had to do was come to closing on the front side and come to closing on the back. So I didn't know it then. I was doing design build, and I was handling every part of the processes because I didn't have any money. So I could create and add my value with knowing and understanding the process and just running the project. So that's what I did. So I got really good at it, and I decided, I was like, well, maybe I should pursue contracting full time, right? So then that's where I got into contracting full time. About 2 years in, I realized that I didn't fully know what I was doing, right? So I found a remodeling group that really, really started dropping nuggets into how I operate. Every time I learn a nugget, right? This is what separates me from everybody else. Every time I learn a nugget, I immediately apply the nugget, and I recommend that you do the same. I immediately apply the nugget to what I'm doing, and then guess what? Yeah, I just got better. I got better, right? So I found design build, and then from there I found a mentor, that was doing 8 figures, doing $10 million a year. And then I found another one that was doing between 11 and $12 million a year, and then they just kind of took me under their wing and showed me their process and how they do things, and they were like, Sam, you're ambitious, you're very hungry. I've never seen anybody, at your age really, try to dive in and be a student or an expert at what they do with design build. So that was, and then I went on to build and work on a whole bunch of different, millions of dollars of projects, building custom homes, and that's kind of how I got my feet wet in the business. So that's enough about me. But it's important to know you have to start somewhere, and you have to take massive action. So today, training, we're going to be talking about how to navigate city approvals and permitting, right? So one of the things that I used to tell clients all the time when I was working for actual clients, I would tell them that this is the part of the process where I don't have control, right? So I have control over every aspect of the pre-construction planning, the material selection. I have control over all of these different processes that have to come together for the logistics to be right for you to get your project off the ground. But when it gets to the city, I don't have control. But the reality of the thing is, you can put yourself in better position by knowing and understanding how to move your project through permitting, right? So I'm going to be breaking this down to you so you truly know how to get it done, right? So first thing that you want to do is start with research, all right? Research is going to prevent you from spending money right away, running out and just hiring an architect, right? So some of the steps that you're going to check is you're going to check the zoning, right? So the zoning, you're going to verify all the things that are important in zoning, which is, the density, which is the use, the height, the parameters that you could actually utilize this particular lot for, and that's going to tell you the story, right? So, and then you want to go into the environmental and flood maps, right? So, you've heard of FEMA. FEMA has certain requirements in certain flood zones based on patterns that they've seen with water accumulation and flooding and stuff like that. So that's going to be important for you to know, because now that's going to tell you how much dirt you need to bring in to get the house at a safe level from floods, right? And this is going to be important because that's going to increase your construction costs, right? So there's an easy way to do it, and I'll get to that shortly. And this is how you need to be preparing before you run out and hire an architect. So then you're going to be looking at your utility and road access. So confirm the water, confirm the sewer, confirm the road access to the actual property, right? Is it a private road? Is it a public road, right? So one of the things that I coach and I highly recommend, especially when you're first starting out, is buy an existing home, knock the house down. They have pre-existing plumbing, they have pre-existing sewer, they have pre-existing roads, and then you have less impact fees. So now you can get your project off the ground a lot faster. So understanding that and understanding the next tip that I'm going to drop on you is going to be very important. So one of the pro tips is schedule a pre-application meeting with the people at the city, right? And then also have your checklist ready for you to know what questions to ask, right? You're asking about zoning, you're asking about density, you're asking about pervious versus impervious, you're asking about setbacks, you're asking about surveys, you're asking about invasive species, rare trees. You're asking about all of these questions before you even go and spend any money with the architect, right? Now you have this clarity. This doesn't even cost you anything. They'll sit down with you for free. And as long as you know how to pull out the right information, then you know the next step is going to be more beneficial to you. And what I like about it as well is you become more professional. You become more understanding on what they're looking for. So now you're digesting exactly how they're looking at this project and what to expect in the next steps ahead, right? So you want to know what's required and the hoops that they're going to make you jump through prior to getting involved, right? And this could save you on time, just in case they don't have a great permit system where the inspections could come out right away. You'll know, hey, listen, it might take them a few days to get to me for this inspection, so I might have more lag time in my build if they're not able to come out right away, right? Most cities, at least the cities that I've dealt with, are relatively good outside of COVID with getting to you the next day so you can continue to move your project along, right? So that's one of the things there. All right, so have your due diligence, understanding your zoning, setbacks, density, and any special requirements prior to sitting down with the architect is going to be vital to you in moving towards the next step, right? So then now you go to assembling your team. And what is your team currently in this phase, right? So your team is going to consist of several people. It's going to be your architect. It's going to be your civil engineer. It's going to be your structural engineer. And then you're going to have a permit expediter, right? And I'll tell you how that expediter comes into play and why that's very important, right? So now you're working with professionals. The architects put together the site plans, right? And all of the lines and all of the boundaries. And honestly, you're not going to need to really look for a civil engineer if it's an architect that has processed a lot of projects. he should have a civil engineer that he could call right away. So the civil engineer typically does not work for the architect. They're a separate company, but they're brought in specifically on civil engineering matters to handle the underground plumbing, to handle the soil types, to handle the runoff, and make sure that it meets all of those city requirements with connections and stuff like that. So that's what civil engineering is going to be responsible for. Then you have your structural engineering, which is going to be the actual structure and what's needed to hold loads, framing, etc. needs to go through structural, and then that's kind of how it all comes together, right? The structural may be able to sign off on some of the MEP stuff, but you're not going to be looking for these people separate, right? And if it's an architect that's going to make you look for these people separate, you probably got the wrong architect, right? You also want to buy plans that have already been through the city, right? Now, are you able to do this on every project? No, you're not able to do this on every project, but this is what you should be looking for, right? This is how to streamline the process and to move it through quickly, right? Get an architect and an engineer that works in the city that's familiar with their codes, right? And familiar with what they're going to be asking for, and the hoops they're going to make you jump through is going to be important. You don't want to, excuse me, hire a in-state architect with an engineer from a different state thinking that it's going to work. That's not going to work. So when architects typically come into a particular area, they could put together all of the plans, and then they use a local structural engineer to kind of firm up the details on what the city's going to require and what their codes are going to be and stuff like that. That's kind of how it's done, and it's important for you to know and understand that walking in. So then we're going to get to your permit expediter, right? So there's several different ways that this is going to come into play, and it's going to be important, right? So when you get to the point of hiring your contractor, it's going to be important for you to question him on how they handle their permits, right? Are they handling their permits in-house? For someone that has handled all their permits in-house and used expediters, it's really important for you to know their system in processing it, because that's going to affect how quickly your job gets approved and how not quickly your job moves, right? So hiring a permit expediter, their job is to communicate with all the parties involved, right? So here's how a permit expediter works. They're going to take the complete package from the architect. They're going to make sure all of the documents are inside of the completed package. For us, we need to have different trade partners. So electricians, applications signed off, plumbers, applications signed off, mechanicals, applications signed off. They're going to make sure that they have the complete package. They're going to submit that to the city, right? Once they submit it to the city, they're going to check every single day on this permit, right? And then once the review comes back and they get the comments, they're going to take the comments, they're going to forward it to the appropriate party, forward it to the architect, make sure that they do their corrections, resubmit that back to the city, and they're going to keep doing this process until you have a permit in hand. If you ask me, it's worth its value in gold, and a permit expediter is important. It is a good spend when you're looking to get through a project quickly, because time is money, right? So that's what that section looks like, and that's a good way to expedite the permits through. All right, so here's a pro tip: choose professionals familiar with the city. They know they know and understand the expectations of the city, right? So I'm a big fan of knowing people that operate with the city, that have relationships with the city already, especially if you're relying on them to be the professional to get you to the goal line, right? So how I looked at my job as a builder and developer is, my job is to take this ball and keep rolling it down the hill until it turns into a snowball, and on the other side, pops out a house or the plan or the property that we're looking to build, right? So that's what's going to be required. So there is several steps involved, but this is what's this is what you got to do, right? This is what you got to do. All right, so let's talk about. All right, so prepare and submit your application. Right, very important stuff. Right, so I talked about some of this a little bit when I was talking about the permit expediters, but here's what you're going to need to make sure that your permits don't get kicked back, your corrections are minimized, and you're not scratching your head at the end of the day as much as you could, right? So make sure you have your application form in and all the fees paid, right? Full construction drawings, not partial, not kind of done, full set of construction drawings with energy and structural calculations inside, right? Also, too, depending on where you're at, what part of the country, you will need supporting documents, right? So your supporting documents are things like your survey, your soil sample, your product approvals, right? I've even had certain cities, right, ask for your actual plumbing fixture when you're submitting the permit package, right? You're probably going, hey, I don't know what fixture that I'm using, but that's part of their requirements is they want to know what plumbing valve is going inside of the wall because it's going to determine how much water flow. And I don't want to get geeky on some of the small details on what they're looking at from a building perspective, but then now you have to go research and figure out what plumbing fixture that you could put in the wall that's going to meet their requirements, right? So it's little things like that that could trip you up from a permitting standpoint, which is going to be important for you to know and understand, right? So proof of ownership, contractor license, and updated insurance. Having all of that full package prepared and ready, updated, submitted one time to minimize your friction because they're gonna have comments. So it's not a matter of if they will, it's a matter of when they submit comments back. What are the adjustments that you need to make to move this package along quickly? So, pro tip, label files correctly and include a detailed scope of work, right? So you want to minimize confusion, right? So you want to minimize confusion when it comes to, all of your documents, right? So very important stuff, right? So obviously larger scale projects are a little bit different, but they also are similar in the reviewing process. It does take a little bit longer. They do want to make sure that every detail is there, especially from a structural standpoint, and they will not stamp that project forward unless everything is fully checked off, right? And I spoke about having a special engineer on one of my previous videos. So that's one thing that will come into play as well with getting your project moved quickly through the process. So then we go into managing the plan review, right? So you may not have to do this. If you decide to hire a permit expediter, then you don't have to worry about this process. But if you decide to take this on yourself, then there's some extra steps involved with making sure that this permit review goes off in a way that makes sense. So some of the things attached to it, which is monitoring online from a weekly perspective on did they get updates on the city? Did they bring comments back? And then now I have to take those comments, submit it back to my architect. My architect will make the corrections, and then now there needs to be a resubmission involved. Sometimes there are things on there that the architect doesn't handle, so make sure you know and understand what those little nuances are in the contract if you're handling the permits yourself. All right, so address reviewers' comments promptly. Typically, I try to get it done within the week. If I check and see if it's on a Monday, and he could get it back typically in about 3 days because the plan is typically done, and it just might need some little corrections on the plan. It should be pretty easy for them to get it done in a couple of days and resubmit it, right? Hopefully your architect doesn't take long for stuff like that, because that's important in getting your project pushed through. All right, so keeping communication professional and concise and very organized. So as the plan is changing and as the city is requiring certain things, know and understand that you have to make those corrections in the background. Typically, you're not really worried about that. Your contractor is handling all these things. I'm fortunate enough that I could speak on several sides of my brain as the investor, as the developer, as the contractor, design builder, and as handling all of the permits. That's what design build is. I handle the whole process for you, right? So, pro tip, build rapport with the reviewer, be polite, be proactive, and hopefully you don't have any issues, but you also need to be a politician and know that you get more with sugar than you do with salt, always. All right, so that's always the goal. You get more with sugar than you do with salt. So then we go into inspection and final approvals, right? So move from permits to certificate of occupancy. So call in inspections in proper order with your foundation, your framing, your MEPs, your roofing, etc., until you get to the final. One of the things that you got to keep in mind is making sure that you request your inspections when you're ready for them, right? So not before, but when you're ready. And then also too, I spoke about this a little bit on the front side, is knowing and understanding how long it's going to take for the inspector to actually get out to you and get out to your property is going to be important as well. You don't want guys sitting around. You don't want them looking at other jobs because your inspections are off. There is some lag time in between. If they're waiting for an inspection to allow us to move steps forward. And this is why this is going to be important in having the right contractor that is going to stay on the project from start to completion, right? It's not going to bounce around, right? That's the biggest nightmare. You heard my story about contractors, right? And it happens. So you don't want to be that guy. So having the inspections called in immediately after their process, and then making sure that as soon as you're done with your final inspection, making that request for your certificate of occupancy, getting that certificate of occupancy, and then now you can move to cleaning and staging your property depending on the size of your project, right? So that's how the process works. All right, so some cities have delays. Some cities are better than others. Some cities are cavemen and they just want paper. Some cities are, lightning speed because of COVID and everything's digital. Some will accept both paper and submissions and also electronic submissions. You have to find that out, and those are some of the questions that you need to ask your building official. So these are some of the hurdles that you need to cross to get your project moved along and processed quickly. So hopefully this answered all of your questions, Andrew, and hopefully everybody received value from that. If you ever wanted to work with us, please reach out to me. Also, too, if you haven't already, hit like and subscribe to help out the algorithm. All right. Outside of that, hopefully you guys enjoyed this and you guys had a great day.